Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the top 3 most valuable legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 3. And what do I mean by that? I mean legendary lords that take a race and elevate it far beyond what it can already do. Especially for weaker races. Either very weak races or even average races in the game. Because many legendary lords that end up in top lists are people like Archeon, Orion, all that kind of good stuff, because they have significant faction benefits. But their races are also very strong races. Wood Elves, Warriors of Chaos, Vampire Counts, etc. In this video, however, I want to shine a light on legendary lords that, although they aren't part of a very strong race, they themselves add a significant amount of value to those races if you are playing them. For free, we have Oxyotl. The Lizardmen aren't a particularly strong race, but they're not particularly weak either. They're kind of middle of the road, though they certainly lean towards the weaker side by default. Unless you count the magical bullshit that you can get with them with Lord Croak. But overall, the Lizardmen do have certain issues. But then enter Oxyotl. First off, let's talk about start position. Oxyotl starts in the Southern Chaos Waste, which is an amazing start position, even if they have made them more difficult by adding Kairos Fateweaver. Before Kairos Fateweaver was added here in the south, the Lizardmen under Oxyotl had free reign over the Southern Chaos Wastes. But start position isn't the be-all and end-all, it's only part of it. On top of that, and this is where we start getting into the real benefits, he gets a major benefit to Skinks, Chameleon Skinks, in terms of upkeep. And every additional rank you gain for these units, you get attack, defense, leadership, speed, and missile damage per experience rank for all Skink infantry, which gives them a significant amount of power in combat. But that's only a portion of what makes Oxyotl so amazing. I mean, his armies, the armies that he has, the armies his faction will have, you can go with the traditional Lizardmen armies, but you can also go with guerrilla style tactics and basically make all of your armies skirmisher armies that are very effective at killing enemy units without taking any single bit of damage. And Oxyotl himself excels at this because of the AP damage that he does have, as well as the Masterful Ambush stance and other benefits. But then you add in Vision of the Old Ones. Basically, these are quests. You're going to start with one, and every time you get the quest, you get instant teleportation to where you need to be. So for instance here, I'm at war with this minor Khorne faction, and I can teleport next to the objective, though I think that's a bit misleading, so to speak, when it comes to that teleportation. But either way, Oxyotl does have access to a great deal of flexibility on his campaign map, and he can go around the world beating up Chaos, which will strengthen the Order Tide against Chaos and give them a significant amount of power. Otherwise, they can struggle against beating back the forces of Chaos. So you'll be teleporting in the north across the map, dealing with forces of disorder, really, including vampires, vampire counts, etc. So Oxyotl does gain a lot from that. On top of all of that, many of these quests will give you blessed spawnings for free. So you will get a pool that's separate from Regiments of Renown, where you can recruit units for free. They'll still have upkeep, that are improved versions of your regular units, and you can do that globally. And that in itself is a great deal of power added to the Lizardmen that no other Lizardman legendary lord does have access to. I mean, there are certainly Lizardmen legendary lords that do have powerful armies, but there's no other legendary lord for the Lizardmen that can get very powerful armies with free recruitment through the blessed spawnings that Oxyotl will have much easier access to than any of the other Lizardmen legendary lord. I mean, obviously they're all going to have blessed spawnings. It's just that Oxyotl has access to far more of them, and blessed spawnings can give you some very powerful armies on the campaign map. And that's why Oxyotl is on this list. He's way above in terms of power compared to the other legendary lords for the Lizardmen. And number 2, we have Boris Ursus for Kislev. Kislev is a fairly weak faction. Issues with their army roster, issues with their provinces, issues with diplomacy, issues with Confederation, the supporter system, invocations, etc. Many problems. Well, Boris Ursus doesn't quite help you deal with all of them, but he certainly makes the Kislev playstyle a lot more bearable and gives Kislev significantly more power on the campaign map. Even if you confederate him, but if you play him, it's gonna be much better. So, first off, he gets a construction cost benefit to garrisons and religious buildings, construction time for province and capital settlement buildings, recruit rank for warbear riders, and settlements in the Chaos Wasteland receive far fewer penalties. So they will still get penalties, but far less harsh. And they will each generate 4 devotion per turn. And devotion can be a pretty significant bottleneck for Kislev because you need it for certain research that can be very useful. You need it for the supporter system through invocations. Can be pretty useful having that extra devotion. And then we've got Boris's special skill tree. What you really want to pay attention here is not the yellow skill tree here, but rather some of the things that are at the top here. First off, he's getting Reseller, so there's no colonization cost faction-wide. And that's actually very significant when you're dealing with Chaos, because Chaos factions have a tendency of raising settlements to the ground. Not just them, but they certainly are more willing to do it than anyone else. And the fact that you can recolonize territory for no cost is a significant boon to Kislev's already weak economy. Then he does have a leadership penalty when for enemies when he's going into battle. He gets Grand Builder, which reduces the construction cost minus 10% for all buildings, and construction time, which in itself is going to be very, very powerful. But here's where things get a bit interesting with Boris, because already that's good enough. He does also start with a powerful army, the most powerful starting armies of Kislev, because he starts over here in the Chaos Wastelands and near the Tower of Torment. But here's where things get interesting for Boris Ursus. He does start with 2 Tsar Guard, 2 Armor Cossars, and 2 Warbear Riders, and a Patriarch, so he has the most powerful army, capable of steamrolling pretty much every single one of his neighbors. Archeon would be a bit of an issue if you decide to fight in your initial province, and you don't want to do that, by the way, for a large number of reasons. But yeah, Boris does have a fairly significant amount of power, which is very much needed to deal with the many horrors that you will encounter when playing a Kislev campaign. For instance, in this campaign, I've got Sigvald, Archeon, and the Demon Prince all coming for me, with multiple stacks of troops that are attacking my territory and becoming a problem in the process. And I've done a pretty good job getting Ungrim all the way over here and giving him territory, so I do have him as an ally, and he's actually conquered a fair chunk of Norska. But you do have campaign flexibility. But there's more to it. The way the supporter system works for you is very different than the supporter system works for Castalton and Katrin. You don't get permanent buffs if you're using the supporter system. Instead, you're getting temporary buffs. Sure, one of those temporary buffs, if you support Castalton, can boost your control, as Castalton and Katrin get the permanent boost to control, but the other one can give you growth. And having good growth can be very, very useful, because it will allow you to expand your empire much more quickly than others. So already, that's a fairly substantial benefit. By the way, the faction benefit that he gets for the construction cost for religious buildings in particular allows Boris Ursus to get churches for a cheaper cost, much lower cost, that you can further reduce with some other benefits, research benefits, all that kind of good stuff. Like, for instance, here I can build churches for 75 gold and 4 devotion. That is ridiculously low, and it is a significant benefit to have that in your campaign. And then, to top it all off, he can confederate both Castalton and Katrin much earlier than those two can confederate each other, because he doesn't have to get a certain number of supporters, because he's not playing with the supporter systems as normally. He doesn't have to get 600 supporters to confederate the other faction, so he's able to control all the 3 major Kislev cities much earlier than either Costin or Katrin, giving him significant faction-wide benefits, recruitment benefits, Lord recruit rank, upkeep faction-wide for like Frostholm, or if we're looking at Prague. Prague is such a delicious city because it gives you such a significant global recruitment benefit, global recruitment duration, and benefit and global recruitment capacity, benefit, recruit ranks. It is pretty incredible when you add it all up. The Kislev cities are obviously a significant money sink, but having all of them is certainly very much worth it if you are going to be playing Kislev. And Boris can get access to all of them much earlier than either Costin or Katrin. He has a better army, he has a better campaign situation, he has a better handle on diplomacy, he has a better situation with the supporter system. I mean, obviously confederating will freeze the supporters, because if either Costin or Katrin get eliminated, the supporters freeze. But it doesn't matter by that point. Like, I confederate Costin earlier than I confederated Katrin in this particular campaign, and I have both of them right over here with some very powerful armies. I have 3 powerful armies here arrayed to stop the tide of chaos. I mean, there can be... Obviously, you still have all the issues that Kislev does have in its campaign, in particular fighting a non-stop war against the forces of chaos, in particular here in the north. But again, he is much better situated to deal with those problems and also to expand. The game plan for Kislev is to expand in the Empire. Like, I took Sylvania, northern Sylvania, and Zufbar from Vlad. Vlad had conquered all of this territory. And I also took Midland. I actually hold quite the vast majority of the most useful provinces of the Empire. The only exception, of course, is Reichland. But I do control Midland, I do control Sylvania, and I do control the Ostermark in this particular campaign, giving me a ton of money in this campaign, which money can be a pretty big issue if you're playing as Kislev. And it can be difficult to break out. But Boris certainly helps elevate Kislev far above what they normally can do. Now, it is ideal to play with mods still, but even without mods, Boris is still a powerhouse of a legendary lord. He's the strongest in combat by far and away. He's got the strongest army, the best starting position, the best campaign situation, and some very significant campaign buffs to go along with it. And the campaign buffs he might lack, he can get by confederating Katrin and Costin and get access to their campaign buffs, like Orthodoxy and Action, for instance, for Costin, though there are going to be some downsides, of course, over there with the Hallowed Wood, or some of the benefits that Katrin can provide, with like control in all provinces, for instance. Katrin is the weakest legendary lord of Kislev by far, by the way. She's just too weak in combat, worst starting position, worst army, etc. But yeah, Boris, number 2. Finally, and number 1, we have Grombrindal, the White Dwarf, who is quite a bit ahead compared to the other legendary lords for the dwarves. He has a significant amount of benefits for his faction and a significant amount of lord benefits as well, which certainly help elevate the dwarves, which are one of the weakest factions currently in the game, into being quite a strong one if you're playing your cards correctly, especially. But what does Grombrindal offer? First off, there's the Living Ancestor event. Now, there's a couple of benefits you can get here. Like, you can get the benefit that buffs your army's combat ability. You can get the benefit that buffs Grombrindal's already pretty decent combat ability, his personal combat ability. Then you get the casualty replenishment benefit, 20%, which is one of the highest you can get early on in the campaign. Like, I think very few other factions would be able to get 20% extra casualty replenishments pretty much from turn 2. And yet that's what Grombrindal does. And then there's the final choice, which gives you 20% research benefit, an upkeep benefit for Grombrindal's army, and an upkeep benefit from Grombrindal's army, among other effects. So very substantial to begin with. And then there's more. Grombrindal himself has a lot of benefits. Melee defense for quarrelers makes them pretty much on par with dwarf warriors. Significant amount of campaign movement range. A huge amount of vigor loss reduction. Armor piercing damage. And some other benefits as well to his army. But what really sets Grombrindal apart is his special blue skill line. And no other legendary lord comes even close to what this guy is offering through his blue skill line. So he gets Ancient Acumen. If you spend 3 points in this gives you free recruit rank faction-wide. You may not want to do this early on, but later on, recruiting armies at rank 3, regardless of any other factor, is fairly significant to begin with. Then you get 15% recruitment cost, all armies faction-wide. So you recruit units at a higher rank and cheaper too. Then 15% campaign movement range, and I don't think any other faction in the game gives as much campaign movement range passively as Grombrindal is able to provide to his faction. Then Get Up, which gives you 6% casualty replenishment rate for all characters faction-wide, all armies faction-wide. Now that may not seem so significant, but here's the thing, dwarves don't have many good casualty replenishment options. They only have that effect as well as the barley field. There's nothing else unmodded that will give you casualty replenishment. So Grombrindal giving them 6% casualty replenishment, yes, it's not as good as what many other factions have available, but it certainly will help even the playing field in a fairly significant way. And then, of course, the White Dwarf's Calling, which gives you 1 more global recruitment capacity, allowing you to recruit more units on a global scale. But here's the thing, that campaign movement in itself would be fantastic, because dwarves, one of the problems dwarves have, especially early on in the game, is they don't have the economy to support too many armies. So having that kind of campaign movement range will allow your forces to get to the battlefield much faster where they're needed. Your limited forces to get to the battlefields where they are so desperately needed. That is a significant amount of power. He does also have 4 quest items. That means 4 quest battles that he has. And they're not particularly difficult to deal with, and each of them will give you 5,000 gold at least, really, more like 6,000, 7,000 gold, which is a godsend for dwarves early on in their campaign. Like, I've gotten all of them by turn 31. That means I've gotten at least 20,000 gold so far in this campaign, which has certainly helped me in my conquest of Nagarond over here, and now I'm moving up against Valkia as well to take out her capital. And I've beaten Valkia, and I'm also in the process of finishing off Hellebrand, which was quite a bit of a challenge. But Grombrindal elevates the dwarves by a fairly significant amount. He takes a very weak race and makes them able to stand toe-to-toe against the likes of Valkia and the sheer mass of Dark Elves, especially Hellebrand. Hellebrand is particularly dangerous because she can get easy access to 2 entire provinces, good provinces, and just continuously pump out armies. Anyone who's ever fought Hellebrand on Legendary will attest to the fact that she just is a menace in the sheer number of units that she'll throw against you, because she has a relatively easy starting position. And she will continuously throw armies at the problem. But Grombrindal can certainly even the playing field with all of the benefits that he's able to provide in battle, in campaign, for his faction. And the great part about it is that, yes, he is far away from the other dwarf legendary lord, so he is quite difficult to confederate. But if you do manage to confederate him, and this is a great part, if you do manage to confederate Grombrindal, you get many of these benefits for your faction, even if you're playing another dwarf legendary lord. You can get his benefits as Forgrim, Ungrim, Belagar, or Forik. Especially if you use a mod to get defeated legendary lords, because Grombrindal generally, the AI of Grombrindal will not be able to stand up to the numerous threats that he has a raid against them. So he will generally be killed on the campaign map. But if you can get this guy, he is a massive asset to your campaign by far and away. It's like if you confederate him as a Forgrim, you're getting more from him just by confederating him than you have from your faction benefits. It is that ridiculous, and that's why I think Grombrindal should be at the top of this list. Like Oxyotl and Boris, as well as people like, say, Malice Darkblade with his insane growth, or Loki Fellheart with the sheer amount of money he can make from sacking settlements. They're all good legendary lords, right? There's a bunch of good legendary lords, but no other legendary lord does so much as Grombrindal to help out his faction, especially when they do need it. He's literally carrying the dwarves on his back in his campaign. And it was already, even when the dwarves came out in Immortal Empires, even when Immortal Empires came out and dwarves were in a horrible state because of the grudges, he still had the most playable dwarven campaign of all of them. And now, with that fixed, he's in a much, much better state than before. Highly recommend, if you want to play a dwarf campaign, I would highly recommend playing Grombrindal.